We produce the plays of Shakespeare using the unrehearsed cue-script technique, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. It's a historically informed practice. A lot of people hear that term like original practice, but we really don't know what an original practice was. Some people think it's how the building was made, some people think it has to do with how the costumes were done. We really don't know. But even if we could do an historically accurate production of Shakespeare, it would bore the shit out of you. I mean, you are not an Elizabethan audience. So we call it an historically informed practice because what we do hopefully gives the audience kind of the same sense, the same experience that someone going to see a show at the Globe would have. Now, back when Shakespeare was doing theater, Shakespeare was popular entertainment. Well, theater was popular entertainment. I mean, here you are. It's your one day off from your job, shoveling the stalls and emptying urine pans over the inn. You're in the middle of Southwark. 500 feet over that way is a bar. Danger, excitement, adventure. 500 feet over there, some bear baiting. Danger, excitement, adventure. 500 feet that way is a brothel. Danger, excitement, adventure. And right here is my theater, and we're doing Henry V. Now, you're not going to come into my theater to see this play. If we just did this last week and you saw it, you're going to go somewhere else. So to get the most butts in the seats, Shakespeare's company and other companies would perform a different show every day of the week, 6 days a week. They would not repeat any performance within a 2-week period unless it was a huge hit. And about every 2 weeks, they would put a new play into their repertoire. So right here, this is a schedule from the Rose Theatre in September of 1595. Gives you an idea of what was going on. Now, if you look at the two lines that are in red there, Crack Me This Nut. Obviously, one of the classics. It was a new play. It was so good that they did it again the next week, and then 2 weeks after that. But if we look down at the ones in orange, on Friday the 19th, The French Doctor, this was the first day that they performed it in 3 months, in 87 days. And they didn't come back to that play again for 293 days. Poor Godfrey of Boulogne was done 122 days before. And then they obviously didn't even do it again that season, so at least more than 293 days later. How are you going to hold a play like that in your head? If this was Hamlet, and you did Hamlet 3 months ago, and now you're doing it today, and you've done 70 different productions in between there, how are you going to keep all of that in your head? And how are you going to rehearse this? Well, the answer is, they didn't. Not the way we think of rehearsals today. Now, say you're doing Godfrey of Boulogne. You show up in the morning, you go over and he fights, and he dances, and he music, and he fits with a dog or a bear, or anything that needs to be choreographed so somebody doesn't lose an eye in the morning. In the afternoons, you perform the play. And then in the evening, you go to the bar, or the bear baiting, or the brothel. Not much has changed in that respect. So you didn't really have time to rehearse the play as a group because you did not get paid to rehearse. You barely got paid to perform. But if you were wasting your time rehearsing plays, you weren't making any money. So given all of that, another economic constraint was that performers never received the entire script of the play. Why would you? One, there were very loose or non-existent copyright laws. So there'd be nothing keeping me from taking my entire copy of Hamlet to somewhere else and selling it for a higher price than I'm making playing Unhappy Guard number 3 that comes in for the last 2 pages. Paper and ink are also expensive. It also took Shakespeare long enough to write Hamlet out longhand once. He's not going to do it 35 times, especially for Unhappy Guard number 2, who comes in for the last 3 pages of the play. And can you imagine, with a production schedule like this, you're going to be doing over 80 productions in a season. Where are you going to put all of those books? They're not going to fit in your little actor's bubble. The answer was this. This is a cue script. And this contains absolutely everything that an actor needs to know to perform a role. It has the absolute bare minimum of what you would need. It has the last 3 words or so of your cue lines, the words that you speak, your entrances, your exits, and any other stage directions that can't be written into the text for whatever reason. So to show you an example, the last act of Comedy of Errors is about 13 pages long. When fully cast, you've got over a dozen characters on stage, and you have over 10 French scenes, over 10 different entrances and exits during that scene. If you are playing the courtesan, this is what you get for the entire thing. Somebody will say, "Thee for a villain," and you come on stage. Somebody says, "At the porpentine," and then you have your line. Somebody says, "The abbey here," and then you have your lines. Someone says, "A man much wrong," and you gather to see them. Somebody says, "Half his life," and you have another line. And then somebody says, "Gossip at this feast," and you leave. You don't know who's saying those lines, when they're saying those lines, how they're saying those lines, if they're actually going to say those lines. And you've got no idea of what's going on in between. And yet, this has absolutely everything that you need to be able to perform a role. So we're going to look at what that is. Sure, a lot of people, you were taught Shakespeare. I'm going to imagine a lot of people in school, you're taught Shakespeare as poetry. I mean, I hate to say it, Shakespeare wasn't a poet, except for the 150 poems that he wrote and the 2 epic poems. And then he wrote plays. So if he wanted to write poetry, he would have written a poem. Romeo and Juliet is not a poem. It's a play. And all of those poetic devices were actually cues and clues for the actors. And those also become the things we get hung up on when we're trying to learn how to read the play. But the plays were never meant to be read in the first place. They were meant to be seen. So your meter, the capitalization, the spelling, the punctuation, those 3 are dramatically different from what Shakespeare's actors would have looked at. When we make these, we use the first folio printing from 1623, the first collection of Shakespeare's plays. And it was taken from the foul papers. And what those were is those were the theater's property. Those were the books that they used as prompt books during the production. So everything that the actors used were still in there. And it was not edited out when they went to print. Now, Ben Jonson also printed his collected works, but he had an eye on readers, and he went through and he cleaned it all up and he made everything standard. Shakespeare's people didn't do that. Who does it now is editors, because you don't get paid to publish Shakespeare, you get paid to edit Shakespeare. So they change all the capitalization and the spelling and the punctuation, and it takes out all of those stage directions that the playwright actually intended for your actors. So if we look at the meter, I mean, people are probably familiar with iambic pentameter, 10 beats. Yay! So if you have a 10-beat line, as you probably learned, that's a full line. That's great. That means everything's going on. When you get an 11-beat, a 12-beat, a 13-beat, a 17-beat line, that means something big is going on there. It really doesn't matter how long the line is. It's just longer than 10. So that is a cue to the actor. If you see a lot of these long lines, there's something going on. There's something being acted. There's a lot of energy there. Now, when you have the short lines, and then something else is going on, then there's room for action. Then there's pausing. But each one of these is a different clue to the actor. So when you go through it, if you have a lot of 10-beat lines, and all of a sudden you've got a 17-beat line, Shakespeare's telling the actor something. If you've got a whole bunch of 17-beat lines, and all of a sudden you have a 2-beat line, Shakespeare's telling you something. The capitalization. Now this gets taken out all over the place. It's great to sit there and compare what used to be capitalized and what isn't. So these are the first few lines of Richard III. And as you can see, now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by this son of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deepest bosom of the ocean buried. Now are our brows bound with victorious wreaths. Anything that is capitalized is an important word. It means it's important for the audience to hear. And if you were scanning those words would be stressed. But you don't have to worry about scanning them because Shakespeare already did that for you. He said, hey, these words are important. Spelling, also one of those things that everybody gets hung up on. It always gets standardized. 4 different ways to spell dear. You've got dear, 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 and dear. They all sound the same. They all mean different things. Now when we look at them, and we see dear with an E, that's kind of a clue to us. We're like, that's spelled a little differently. Maybe we need to do a little bit more research. Maybe we need to look that up. The only thing we read more than our script when we're doing unrehearsed are dictionaries. I've got about 4 dictionaries that I read when I go through the script to find out what these lines actually mean. Dear is also your ass. Goes back to dear, to hinds, being a female deer, your hind parts. So anytime you see a deer, it can always be a butt joke. Punctuations drive everybody crazy. Everybody always pauses when they come to any kind of punctuation when they're doing Shakespeare. Hamlet is long enough already. Please stop pausing on every comma. It's already going to be a 3-hour slog if you're doing it quickly. If you stop every time you hit a punctuation mark, we're going to be here all night. So you've got your full stops, your periods, which is the end of the thought, and that's really where things go. They go to the end of the thought. They don't go to the end of the line. Then you have an exclamation point, which is a full stop. I mean, that's big, that's huge. And it's also probably one of the most edited punctuation marks in Shakespeare. My friend was doing a production of Twelfth Night, and in the first act, the script that he used had more exclamation points than the entire first folio. I guess the editor was very excited about the show. You've got your question marks there. You've got, and Shakespeare didn't have the Pennsylvania bell curve. You know, are you going to dinner tonight? So how do you ask a question? Are you going to dinner tonight? Because that question could be somebody else's cue, and they're listening for that question mark. Your commas move things forward. Your colons, semicolons, they're shifts in thoughts. They're not pauses, but they move everything forward. And your parentheses are an aside, which you never see aside written in Shakespeare, or you shouldn't. Because it was taken for granted. Shakespeare didn't have a fourth wall. They hardly had a back wall. The audience was right there. Hamlet isn't pondering to the sky, oh, to be or not to be. No, he's looking at the guy in the front row going, what do you think? Should I kill myself? Is that a good idea? It's just like going to sleep, right? And that right there, that's so much more engaging anyway. But these are things that all get cleared up, but are cues and things that help the actors perform when you're working from a cue script, and that's all you've got. Hooray! All right, now the language. When we talk about the language, I'm talking about the words that you actually use. So one of the first rules when you are up and performing is that you cross to the person to whom you are speaking. How many times have you seen anything? You're just like, oh, hey Jim, how you doing? But there's 5 guys on stage, you don't know who Jim is. You know, you gotta cross to Jim. Because you said Jim. Now, if you don't say Jim, and we'll look at an example of this, you know, you don't necessarily know who gave you your cue from your cue script. Of course, your character does. You always know who you're talking to. But as a hint for the actor that I just go and talk to whoever just said my line, I'm going to move that way. And it keeps things moving on the stage, so you don't get park and bark Shakespeare, because that is just so much fun to watch. Same thing with this, that, these, those, and they're like, oh, you know, that chair over there. Great, that chair is over there, but when they talk about this chair that's 20 feet that way, you don't know in the audience where you're looking. There could be 5 chairs. You don't know which one they're talking about. So I need to go to that chair, because it can't be this if you can't touch it. There is also stage directions. You notice, again, there's not a lot of stage directions in Shakespeare, because the stage directions are actually written into your lines. In your lines, you have stage directions for your scene partners, which means they have stage directions for you as well. So not only are you following along with the cue script, waiting for your cue to say your line, you are also listening for someone to throw a stage direction your way, so that you do it when you are told to do it. So if we look back at the courtesan's cue script here, or that last scene, for a villain, they enter. Someone says, at the porpentine. And the courtesan says, he did, and from my finger snatched that ring. Well, the courtesan here, you don't know who you're talking to. And I said, hey, Steve. Yeah, that's right. No, you're just answering some question. And it may not even have been a question for you. But you say he did, so you cross to whoever gave you that line. And you talk about that ring. So you're obviously not right next to whoever has that ring. These are also all 10-beat lines. So there's nothing crazy going on here. She's just doing her thing. The next is the Abbey here. You have as sure, my liege. I have a little aside of the audience, my liege. As I do see your grace. Liege is usually reserved for a king or somebody of extremely high status. And that's who she's talking to. So she is crossing to the liege. As I do see your grace. Grace is also your... So, the courtesan is just being a courtesan. The last one, hath his life, sir, I must have that diamond from you. So, you're crossing to somebody who has a diamond, but you're not getting too close. Because it's not this diamond, it's that diamond. And then you hear gossip at the feast, and you leave. So we say we're unrehearsed, which we are. We don't rehearse as a group. We rehearse our cue scripts. It does not mean we are unprepared. We do more, you're going to do more research going into a cue script than you are if you have the entire script in front of you. Especially when you have odd spellings, odd punctuations. You have to know exactly what you're doing. Because not only, again, do you have your stuff, you're giving everybody else what they're doing on stage. So you better hope your scene partners are doing the same thing, or it's going to get real ugly real quick. So to give just some examples of some of the stuff we find when we go through this. This is a line taken from Taming of the Shrew. Biendello is talking to his master, who has gotten his other servant to pretend to be him, to woo the woman that he wants to marry. And Biendello is coming back to his master and saying, hey, everything's worked out great, go and get her, game over. And he's not getting it. So at this point, he says, I knew a wench who was married in an afternoon as she went to the garden for parsley to stuff a rabbit, and so may you, sir. So we know here talking to that sir. But what else is going on in this line? You've got these beautiful capitalized words. You've got your garden, which of course is a piece of ground that's planted for herbs and flowers. It's also the female pudendum. Parsley used to be prescribed as a cure for sexually transmitted diseases. And the rabbit, or a topilus caniculus, sorry, Shakespeare, not Latin, same modern slang to a beaver. So, you could believe a lot of the editorial notes that you read that say, oh, stuffed rabbit was a very popular dinner for marriage feast. Or, you can believe that he's saying, if you don't lock her down now, you're going to regret when you get the clap from her later. I didn't write. It's all Shakespeare. Another one of my favorites. This is from Richard III. There is a scene where King Edward is making peace between his family and the other nobles after they have, at this point, won the War of the Roses. And Earl Rivers has this wonderful line where he says, by heaven, my soul is purged from grudging hate, and with my hand I feel my true heart's love. Put her there, buddy. We're going to bury the hatchet. It's going to be great, right? Of course, that's what he means. Well, heavenly is also homosexual love, taken from Plato's quote that heavenly love is exclusively male. The soul is the bottom of the thing, like the sole of your foot, your butt or your bottom. And purged is emptying the bowels. The seal is the men's genitals, or to stamp or engender something. And my true heart's love. Heart is also the buttocks or the ass, because as we all learned from Porky Sinclair in Waiting for Kirtland, English people drop their H's, L-O, L-R-U. So heart would sound like art, sounds like ass. And love is a fart, a luff, or you're making fun of somebody speaking, they're full of hot air, they're just a fart. Or it's nothing, like if you've ever played tennis, 40 love. It means nothing. So, he's either saying we're going to bury the hatchet, or Stink pong. And if you go with the second meaning there, it tells you a lot about this guy without having to say a lot about this guy. And we like to keep the double entendres double. But you can see just by going through here, looking at this, and following these clues that Shakespeare actually wrote into the text intentionally from in the source materials, you're going to get a lot of different interpretations as well. Some other aspects of it too, like we said, there is no fourth wall. Everybody's just talking. Everybody knows. They're not pretending that they're not people doing a play. Everybody's here. It also moves a lot faster because they don't have those pauses, which is great when it's done right because you actually do get time to go out and have a drink after a 3-hour Hamlet. So again, I am the artistic director of the New Renaissance Theater Company. We've been performing like this since 2014. We tour around the Pittsburgh area this summer between June 21st and July 14th. We're going to be touring Much Ado About Nothing and Twelfth Night. The shows are free. You can find the schedule on our website. And I hope we see some of you folks at the show. Thank you very much.